Dear learners, in this module, we'll discuss the law relating to enterprises in India. So, enterprises are the engines of economic growth. They create jobs, fuel innovation, and contribute to the national development. But every engine needs the right framework to run smoothly. This framework is provided by the Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Development Act of 2006. Apparently, the success of these enterprises, that is the micro, small, medium, is largely dependent on the laws, compliances, and the classifications that determine how they operate and grow. This is also true for the other business organizations and the other business types that we have, such as the companies, partnerships, etc. Now, understanding the MSME Development Act isn't just about understanding the legislation. It is about understanding how India nurtures its entrepreneurs, balances regulation with support, and builds competitiveness in a global economy. So, today, our lecture is dedicated to the topic Introduction to the MSMED Act. So, to begin with, a clarification that there are various other laws that are applicable to the enterprises for regulating aspects pertaining to taxation, environment impact, etc. However, we'll confine our discussion to the Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Development Act of 2006. It is the most comprehensive law that we'll be dealing with. So this law actually regulates in India the micro, small and medium enterprises. It is the law that regulates the enterprises in India. Now, the Act was notified in the year 2006. It contains 6 chapters and has 32 sections. It came into effect on 2nd of October 2006. Now, the objective of this Act is to provide for facilitating the promotion and development and for enhancing the competitiveness of micro, small, and medium enterprises and for the matters connected therewith and incidental thereto. So, what are the key features of this Act? One of the key features is that this Act defines the medium enterprises for the first time, and it seeks to integrate the 3 tiers of these enterprises: micro, small and medium. So we'll discuss this classification in detail in a separate lecture. Now, the preamble of any act is considered as reflective of the legislative intent. That is, what was the intention of the legislators while enacting that particular act. The preamble of the MSMED Act reads as an act to provide for facilitating the promotion and development and enhancing the competitiveness of micro, small and medium enterprises, and for matters incidental thereto. The second para reads, whereas a declaration as to the expediency of control of certain industries by the Union was made under Section 2 of the Industries Development and Regulation Act 1951. And whereas it is expedient to provide for facilitating the promotion and development and enhancing the competitiveness of micro, small and medium enterprises and for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. We'll see that the first and the last para are somewhat similar. We'll discuss this in detail. Now, since this entire wording is very heavily worded, so for the benefit of our learners, we'll simplify this. We'll break this into parts. So as it reads, that it's an act to provide for facilitating the promotion and development and enhancing the competitiveness. So this act is basically meant to promote, support and develop MSMEs. It also seeks to make them more competitive in the economy. Now, in addition to this, it covers connected therewith and incidental thereto. So this means that the Act shall also deal with all other issues or any other related issue that may arise in this process. For instance, the aspect related to credit. Now, let's look at the second part. It's a declaration. It provides that the Industries Development and Regulation Act of 1951, that is the IDR Act, has vested the central government with the authority to control and regulate certain industries whenever it was necessary in the public interest. In Section 2 of the same Act, the Parliament had already made a formal declaration that such control by the Union government was expedient in the public interest. It reads as, "It is hereby declared that it is expedient in the public interest that the Union should take under its control the industries specified in the first schedule." So this declaration contained under Section 2 of the IDR Act means that the Parliament has recognized that the centre should step in and manage industries for the greater good of the country. So as and when it's required in the public interest, the centre would step in and manage certain industries. So when the MSMED Act of 2006 was introduced, its preamble referred to the declaration that was already present in the IDR Act. The logic was that since Parliament has already declared that regulating industries is in the national interest, the Union also has the power. Union, we mean the central government, also has the power to make a special law to promote and develop MSMEs, that is the micro, small and medium enterprises. Now let's understand the last part. Since by 2006 it was clear that the MSMEs form the backbone of the Indian economy, but they faced challenges like lack of finance and credit access, outdated technology, competition from large industries and foreign companies. So the government decided that it was expedient, that is, necessary and beneficial to enact a dedicated or separate law for MSMEs, not just for regulating them, but also for promoting and developing them and to facilitate, promote competitiveness amongst these enterprises. Moving further, now what are the key objectives of the MSME Act? The first objective is to address the different issues that affect the MSMEs, inter alia, the coverage and investment ceiling of the sector. So we'll discuss what coverage and investment ceiling means in the later part of this lecture. Now the Act specifies the ceiling limit which categorizes an enterprises into micro, medium or small. This limit is revised every 5 years to keep pace with the changing dynamics of the economy. The MSME Act seeks to facilitate the development of these enterprises and also enhance their competitiveness. So it provides that the legal framework for recognition of the concept of enterprise, and it defines enterprises as including manufacturing and services both. Or we can say that it defines an enterprise as inclusive of both manufacturing and service entities, or the enterprises that are involved in manufacturing of goods, as well as the enterprises that are involved in rendering and providing services. It also seeks to integrate the 3 tiers of these enterprises: micro, small and medium. Now thirdly, the Act empowers the central government to undertake programs and issue guidelines and instructions to develop and enhance the competitiveness of the MSMEs. Now the question is that why, when we already had a law regulating industries, or we had different laws that were regulating industries and other kinds of business enterprises, what was the need of having a separate law for MSMEs? So here we'll discuss the various reasons which necessitated the enactment of a separate law for enterprises that are micro, small, or medium. So the first reason was the multiplicity of laws and regulations. That is, the existence of multiple laws and regulations that were applicable on enterprises. It had been a long outstanding demand of the sector to have a single and comprehensive act for the development and regulation of small enterprises. Further, this multiplicity of laws and regulations resulted in cumbersome compliance. So it made it very cumbersome for these enterprises, which were already very small as compared to the large industries, to comply with the same laws and regulations, as the same set of laws were applicable to all kinds of enterprises, irrespective of their size, their variety in terms of what they were dealing with. So, given the fact that these enterprises were small in nature and they had limited awareness and resources, it was becoming a problem, a burden for them to comply with the multiple laws that were binding on them. Further, these laws also required several visits of the inspectors concerned in order to ensure that these enterprises were complying with the law. Now, further reason or another reason that was responsible for the separate law that we have today was that there was a growing contribution of these MSMEs to the economy. So these enterprises were rampantly increasing, and simultaneously their contribution to the GDP was also increasing. Next, while the small scale industries continued to be important for the economy, in the recent years, these small scale services have also emerged as a significant sector, contributing substantially to the economy and employing millions of workers. Therefore, it became necessary in the practice to address the concerns of both small scale industries as well as the services that they were providing, and to recognize these services as well as industries together as small enterprises. Further, there was a requirement to address Further, there was a requirement of the law that could regulate the small scale industries as well as the service sector together for facilitating the ease of doing business. There was also a pressing need to ensure the development of small enterprises while simultaneously ensuring their regulation. So, in a fast growing economy like ours, the natural mobility of small enterprises to medium enterprises had to be facilitated through an appropriate policy and legal framework. So, a legal framework was required to facilitate this mobility. So, as we discussed, the enterprises were growing, their size was increasing. So, their turnover was also increasing, and investment was also increasing. That resulted in their upward movement from small to medium. So, there was no law that was dealing with their transition. Further, the medium enterprises were not defined before the MSME Act. Thus, a law was required to facilitate this transition as well. Lastly, but an important point was that there were recommendations of the Abid Hussain Committee in 1997 and of the study group under Dr. S.P. Gupta in 2000. They highlighted the need for a proper legal framework for small sector to relieve it of the requirements to comply with multiple rules and regulations. So to summarize this, let's picture the everyday reality of a small entrepreneur. They juggle multiple laws and regulations. They struggle with cumbersome compliance, face limited awareness and resource issues, and they often endure and have to bear the cost of several visits from the inspectors. All this makes their contribution to the economy hindered, or it impedes their contribution. So, this is exactly why the MSME Development Act was introduced, in order to more facilitate their progress, their development, their contribution to the economy, and to simultaneously simplify, support, and strengthen these enterprises. So it's aptly written and been said in various reports as well as written by many scholars on law that the enterprises actually constitute the backbone of Indian economy. So these MSMEs are the backbone of India's enterprise sector. Now moving further, so how, when we say that these enterprises form the backbone of the Indian economy, so we'll look at how they contribute to the national development. Firstly, uh, or to say, or look from a different perspective, since we've looked from the need for a separate law, now we'll look at this need from the economic perspective and the role of MSMEs in the national development. So the micro, small, and medium enterprises are basically nurseries of entrepreneurship. They're often driven by innovation and creativity. So they propel innovation and human creativity. So their role in the economic and social development of the country is already established. They have an impressive economic profile considering the terms of higher labor to capital ratio they have as compared to the large industries. Their contribution to the economic growth, particularly in the Indian context, is very significant. As a vital contributor to India's industrial landscape, the MSME sector plays a crucial role in manufacturing, in exports, and in employment. With 5.93 crore registered MSMEs that we have in India, they employ more than 25 crore people and generate a significant share in the economic output. Further, in the year 2023 and 24, the MSME related products accounted for 45.73 of India's total exports, reinforcing that their role in positioning the country as a global manufacturing hub. Now, the aim of this law, the MSME law, is actually to build a very strong foundation. This foundation is required, or it's actually propelled by fostering innovation, enhancing competitiveness, and ensuring better access to resources for these MSMEs. Now, through various steps, what the government is doing is that it's trying to equip MSMEs with certain tools that are needed to expand their reach and to strengthen their contribution to the India's economic growth. So, to further elaborate this, or to say that how these MSMEs contribute to the national development, they have an important role to play in national objectives. They contribute to the national objective of equity and inclusion because these MSMEs, they are pivotal in economic and social development by how they employ people, and they contribute to the economy by their share in the GDP, their ratio to of labor and the enterprises. Moreover, they are spread across geographies, the geographical location. So their scattering across India makes them more accessible and it results into inclusion of more and more people into entrepreneurship. Further, these MSMEs are very heterogeneous in certain terms. So, firstly, in terms of size of the enterprises, they are micro, small, and medium. Then, also in terms of the variety of products and services they offer. Lastly, also in terms of the technology that they employ. So, considering their levels and the kind of manufacturing or services they're involved in, the kind of activity they're engaged, they apply and involve a lot of technology of different levels and different kinds. So all this contributes to their heterogeneity in different parameters. So further, there are about 21 major industry groups in the small scale sectors where the MSME operate. This also gives us an idea about their pervasive role in the Indian economy and how widespread they are in terms of their inclusivity, the sectors they span. So the first one is food products, the second is chemical and chemical products, third, basic metal industries, fourth, metal products, fifth, electricity, machinery and parts, sixth, rubber and plastic products, seventh, machinery and parts except electrical goods, eighth, hosiery and garments, ninth, wood products, 10th, non-metallic mineral products, 11th, paper products and printing, 12th, transport equipment and parts, 13th, leather and leather products, 14, miscellaneous manufacturing industries, 15, other services and products, 16, beverages, tobacco and tobacco products, 17, the repair services that we have for our mobile phones, our laptops, cotton textiles, wool, silk, synthetic fiber textiles, jute, hemp, and mester textiles, and other services. So we see even in the textile sector, they cover such a broad ambit. Repair sector, they include from manufacturing to repair, edibles, food and beverages, transport, paper, as well as printing. In the garments, in the textile, they also include the ready-made garments, hosiery and garments. So their ambit and the industry groups these MSMEs operate is very wide. That is the reason they're considered as the backbone of the economy. The other reason is that they're very widespread. They have included more and more people into the entrepreneurship. They're the major reasons for the or a major boost to the startup sector or preferred choice for the startups. Now, in summary, if we look at what we've discussed in this lecture, so we've discussed first the overview of the MSME Act, MSMED Act, and we've discussed its preamble, we've discussed its key objectives, we've also discussed why at all we require a separate law for MSMEs, then we had a discussion on the salient features of the enterprises, so why they are important, that a new feature has been included, that is the feature of medium enterprises, that there is these enterprises provide you a variety. They also provide you a variety in terms of technology, in terms of size, in terms of what you want to do, manufacture certain goods, or you want to provide or render certain services. Then we discuss the major industry groups where these kinds of enterprises operate. Thank you. With this, we come to an end of our discussion on the introduction to the MSMED Act